Hello, ladies and gentlemen, I am Admiral Ellis, and this is episode number 98 of Under Construction, and we are going to be hitting this from two different sides today, this large empty space between what we've done and what we've done, and those points are largely in here, along the track, specifically, and just outside of town here. That's where we'll go if we get bored with this stuff. And I'm going to try to break it up. I used to try, for a period of time, I tried to do no more than 30 minutes on a single task, just to keep things interesting, and I've noticed that it may have become a little bit more important now to keep things interesting. Also, I used to have music, and I discontinued that because I kept getting copyright strikes. And I think my channel is still eligible for making money, but I have a full-time job now, and the measly amount of cash that I did previously get from YouTube monetization, it really doesn't make a difference at this stage. Not to say that I don't mind it, but it really only comes once every several months, if at all. So, it goes to show if you're trying to make a living, do it on Patreon. That said, don't discount ads on YouTube videos because they're how YouTube stays around. So they're important. They're just much less important for the content creators and much more important for the website. Having a video sharing site as large as YouTube without any real way that they make money aside from advertising and a voluntary subscription package. It's amazing that they've stayed in business and in existence as long as they have. You'd think that it's almost like they're too big to fail at this point, right? It would be a catastrophe if YouTube went down for good. Anyway, yeah, there was a point in time where it was really imperative to have videos and, any sort of anything that you wanted to share. You needed to host it yourself, or else there was no way to get out to the public. And then things like YouTube came around, and other things like Google Drive and stuff like that certainly expanded upon that, capitalized on that. Now we have all sorts of other ways to distribute stuff like that without hosting it locally. And that's so big in terms of, the world and connectivity and stuff like that. It's just a huge deal. I don't know, maybe I'm sappy about the internet, but we're living in an unprecedented age. We're living in the information age, definitely. We're also living in the disinformation age, but that's really neither here nor there. It's just a result of the first. When information becomes so easy to get, it also becomes easy to fake. So, fake news and all that. Like, for example, funniest piece of news from today, by far, is that there was a press briefing or a rally, or not a rally. It was some sort of event, right? That Trump was hosting. I don't remember the specifics. The only thing that I remember, and the only real takeaway from it, is the fact that they went to put up the presidential seal behind him, and they put up this fake presidential seal of the double-headed eagle, as in the Russian imperial eagle, and also it was clutching, I believe, money in one talon, and in the other talon it was holding golf clubs, which is hilarious. And I know it's in some ways fairly offensive, because you're actively poking fun at the president, but at some point things are just funny. I'm not gonna say you can't poke fun at the president anyway. Certainly, when you have any public official in office, there is no end to the amount of fun you can make of them. It all has to do with how they lean into it. We've had, I think, both ends of that kind of spectrum in a very short time here. Certainly, Obama's Thanks Obama video with the not being able to fit the cookie in the milk is one of the all-time best president making fun of himself moments, possibly, that I know of. Anyway. Thanks, Obama. But not to go down that sort of track, what was I going to get on about when I came on here? It certainly wasn't politics. There has been a lot in politics lately, but that's not really that difficult to discern. I did spend my time watching the whatchamacallit, the Mueller hearing, and also realized one of my largest takeaways from the Mueller hearing was the fact that I've been pronouncing his name wrong this entire time. Not that that should be your only takeaway, but I thought it was Mueller, because we had a building at RPI called the Mueller Center, and also Ferris Mueller, which in my head I'm just picturing Ferris Bueller with the head of a donkey. But anyway, yeah, that's this week in politics. I try to stay informed, I try to pay attention. Anyway, an announcement from me. Now, this was already announced on the podcast, but if you didn't watch the podcast, because, I mean, honestly, who does? Or at the very least didn't skip to the end and then go into the cargoes and whatever. After the second time that the podcast actually got up, because I made a mistake the first time around and didn't include the audio of everybody except for myself. I mean, not that they're really important, but, you know, it's kind of nice to have them there. That was a joke, by the way. I have to clarify. I did announce the opening of the official Iron Horsemen Discord. And now that we have that, we have started to migrate fairly quickly away from the Skype platform. And I will gladly discuss in depth, and I'll likely get into this in a minute anyway, what I see as the pros and cons, the differences, you know, the motivations for the changeover, and that sort of thing. The real thing that has been holding me back for the last several years where Discord, or the last couple I suppose, where Discord has been, you know, such a prominent fixture in the gaming community and beyond, is the fact that I had no idea how to work it. And it was literally not necessarily the fear of the unknown, but the knowledge and admission that I had built the groups from the ground up on Skype, knowing a lot of what Skype had to offer, and then Skype added new features, and we figured them out one by one, and incorporated them into our strategy. And it wasn't that hard, because the groups were very segmented, and things were broken down, and if you made a mistake in one area, you could say, okay, everybody, 20 or so people, let's pack up and migrate to a replacement group because something's gone awry. It happened, I think, twice. And it wasn't catastrophic by any means. It was, okay, sorry, let's just move over everyone to the new group. Sorry about that. I've discovered a solution to the problem, but we can't do it here. Or the solution to a problem is getting a new group, because we've had this catastrophic bug or whatever, or a catastrophic mistake, and we can no longer, there's no way to remedy that here, at least not without just sitting and hoping. So, that was a relatively simple affair. When we had an issue in Skype, we never had more than 20, 25 people in a group aside from the groups where we couldn't call, which I was fine with. I won't say it was done on purpose, but it was just a consequence of Skype limitations. And those are also the two groups that you could join by link, which was another fairly, or not maybe a new thing, but something that we had come across and decided to use to our advantage in Skype. Later on, after we'd been using the program for a number of years. Originally, we had just formulated groups. We had, I believe, groups on Google+, as well as groups on Skype, and then we brought them together and we made the first ever group, which was called the Warships Crew, because it was people that played Warships, our Minecraft minigame. And then from there, I ended up getting a lot of people who would reach my channel because of non-Minecraft videos and wanted to hang out and communicate. and we made a group for them that was called the Iron Horsemen. And that was many years before the series debuted. And it was before we even had the logo that we use today, because that was done in conjunction with the series. So, there's your quick history lesson. We made the Iron Horsemen the group, and then we started the Terminus podcast, and then something like a year later, we started making the Iron Horseman Chronicles, which is the thing that is probably the thing that we're most well known for. That channel has around 70,000 views, which is pretty impressive. I'll be honest, and I really, I love that series to death, and I want nothing more than to be able to devote more time. What the heck did I just do? No, get out of here. Then be able to devote more time to doing that, because the universe that we've created there is rich, and it's deep, and it's got a lot going on. More than we've been able to let on yet, honestly, which is part of the thing that kills me, because there are so many things in this sort of extended universe that we haven't even been able to allude to yet, because we don't have all the stuff out of the way that has to go before it, that has to set up all the background, or at least set it up enough so that we can drop these, not exactly bombshells, but these things that we want to talk about. I almost jumped into a discussion about the Iron Horseman the other day with information that would have been, that basically is classified at this point. Anyway, the other thing we did in Warships, semi-related, is that we started doing this sort of chronology and this alternate history. I don't know, that was pretty cool. I like doing that with people. Anyway. That was my phone. My phone's doing something. So, okay. I think I'm going to push this mud beach all the way up to here. See, I don't necessarily have any ideas about what we need to do if we go over to Mason's Landing. Or even Mason Valley. I just don't know what's next, necessarily. I have some ideas, but we do definitely need to fill in those other fields. I think I am going to do the same thing. It just wouldn't be dairy cows, so we don't need the creamery. And then once we get out of the other side, of the whole area there, I'll be able to do other things. Sorry, I'm kind of distracted here thinking about what we need to do here. Give me the Oz gravel again, and we'll just sort of see if we can round out this area up here. Yeah. So I just talked about like 5 different topics at once. Yeah, so we made this Discord. The link, it should be in the description, but if I forget to put it in the description, it's in the cargoes of the most recent podcast, and it will be in the cargoes of every podcast henceforth, instead of the Skype links, which were no longer functional because of the influx of Russian bots. Which is one of the reasons that we had to curtail mainly using Skype. It's really a shame. It's, it was really a crappy way to go, but it just didn't have for a time, there was really no, there was no problem, or there were no problems with the bots, and then the bots showed up, and then it sort of came and went, and then eventually there were just too many of them that it didn't seem worth it to keep the links active to join the group. And at that point, then we knew that we were sort of kicking ourselves, or, shooting ourselves in the foot by not using a platform that you could do that on easily and effectively. The reason being that we rely on, people bringing in news to us, for a long time. We relied on that. And the fact of the matter is, without the ability to get new people in there, you run into the situation where you have a dwindling number, ultimately, of content contributors for the podcast, and then a lower pool of people to choose from. And also, a lot of people had just moved off Skype. I know a lot of people pretty much just had Skype to communicate with our group, especially towards the end, but I do know a lot of people didn't make a Skype initially for the sake of communicating with the Horsemen and the Terminus groups. So there's that. And yeah, I knew that a lot of people had moved off. I am not sure too many people besides myself had not touched Discord at all. So yeah, it was like, well, we're missing out on this possible audience and audience interaction. So that was the first thing that really got me thinking. Aside from the fact that Discord had shown itself to be a popular and otherwise versatile platform, and a lot of people were on it, and a lot of people were talking about it. It's, but rarely would I decide to pack up, years of nostalgia, basically, and move over to a different platform just because people were excited about it. It's that isn't a good reason to me. So that's why we didn't do it right away. But that was the first straw, losing the ability to get people into the groups, via a link and not manually adding them. So that was a problem. And then following that, although even before that, we had lost some people, because they just didn't feel like booting up Discord anymore, or booting up Skype anymore, and they had everything they needed on Discord. And so that was, we were hemorrhaging people, and also we didn't have a way to get new people in easily. So, yeah, for more than one reason, one of them being the fact that we were on what was viewed as an outdated platform, and therefore people didn't really want to bother with it. Understandable. But it was hurting our... I guess the word wouldn't be bottom line, but it was hurting our ability to connect with fans and new people. Whoops. So, that was problem number one. Problem number two was, for me, that and for some other people as well, I was having trouble. Uh-oh. The hell was that? What the hell? Hold on a second. Something just went really weird with, Alright, seems to still be on time. I was having trouble with Skype. Not necessarily on the computer, on the desktop version, but on the browser version and on the phone, which my phone is outdated anyway, so it was probably, to an extent, kind of just me on this part. But there were a couple of bugs that were cropping up that were that were causing problems. So that was the thing that sort of made me think about, well, this situation is not too great right now. It's still good. It's still good enough. We've got several active groups of people that are dedicated, of people that are good friends, and there's no reason to let that go necessarily. But I should look into this Discord thing. And Ogilius comes to me, and he asks me he asks me why, and my response was, well, I don't have anything against the platform, I just don't know how to work it, like I previously stated. And like I had mentioned before, I'd said that I wanted to do I wanted to make a Discord, and there was a period of time where I was just sort of waiting for the right time to learn, and then I couldn't really find a whole lot of documentation. I was kind of getting discouraged, and a couple of people had said they would help me, and then they never got around to it, or, I won't necessarily blame them, although they will remain nameless. I won't necessarily blame them, but it just never happened. Partially my fault, of course. And I was super busy. So I just got turned off to the idea. And also, there was a period in time where there was very nearly a schism over the platform use, which really turned me off to the idea because it made it seem like it was kind of fanatical almost. It just didn't sit right with me. And I sort of went, oh, I'll deal with this later. And that was before any of this stuff really started to transpire. The other things, the strikes that I was talking about. But, earlier in the month, Julius came to me and he said, why haven't you done it? And I explained those things that I just outlined. I don't know how to use it. I've sort of been turned off from the platform because of the way people have acted with regard to it, and the fact that I had to pull the group together over I was on vacation in Italy at the time, and that hampered my efforts to communicate with everyone and make sure that things were going to be okay, because it was really just kind of ridiculous. And, for a while there, it seemed like things had dropped off on on Skype, and then things had bounced back. And so I was sort of like, there's really no rush to do this right now. And then technical things happened, and I realized, well, we really could / should be reaching or trying to reach a larger audience, and it was really mostly about that. I was just worried about how things like the podcast were going to get affected, much less the individual people and the individual groups, because there was really ultimately nothing wrong with them. And I would have loved to have somebody log onto Skype after several years and have us still hanging around there, which, to an extent, I have no plans to get rid of the Skype groups, and I still keep Skype open in case somebody is around over there. Not necessarily sure why somebody would be, but I do it just to be a good keeper. And we have virtually everyone moved over at this point. I did a test run with some guinea pigs, 3 people that I had chosen that would fit the different roles that I was planning, and made sure that everything worked, more or less. Got everything set up. Like I said, Julius did a really fantastic job of walking me through it, and at the same time, I did uncover a couple of resources, and also just playing with the program yielded some learnage, some things that he didn't know that I just happened to figure out. And there are still some things that I am learning. I recently discovered that there is a subreddit specifically for Discord where you can ask questions and things like that. So, I'm now keeping track of the progress there. They're a very transparent company, which is a good and bad thing. Well, there's hardly anything bad about being transparent, but I'm not a big fan of their data practices. Part of me wishes I didn't know, but, honestly, there's really nothing worse than not knowing. It's just how you deal with it. So, yeah. I don't know. But we went through that, and a couple of weeks went by, and I had everyone sort of set up in the way of, my guinea pigs, and I was ready to open the server, because I decided to do it on a Terminus podcast, which made sense for a couple of reasons. The first being that it's something that I would be able to see, some immediate reactions, which was just cool for me. And secondly, more importantly, it meant that I could close down, or at least stop posting in the Terminus guest list, and say, hold on, we're doing the podcast, stop posting. An announcement will be released shortly as to why I'm asking to stop posting. And so that happened. And then I released the announcement, and now everything's up and running over there. With not a single thing posted in the guest list out of line, in terms of news articles. So, it was pretty good. It went fairly smoothly, and there were only a couple of things that I really had to bug fix, and a couple of things that I wanted to improve upon, notably the role of Gulag, because one of the things, you can throw people out of the Skype group. It's really not that hard to do. And you can throw people out of a Discord server. It's not that hard to do. But I don't want to throw somebody out of the Discord server. I want to make an example of them. And yes, being thrown out is having an example made of you, but it's much less public than in Skype. In Skype, you get the messages of, and in Discord you do too, but they're not necessarily in line with your conversation, where it's like, such and such has been removed from the server, or group, has been kicked from the group. It was, and so, on Skype, that happened, and on Discord it kind of doesn't, and I realized early on with the roles and stuff that I could have something else happen. And that is to make a role where you cannot speak, and a role where you cannot write, and a role where you can do nothing except just sit on the sidelines and watch and listen. And I decided that this was fantastic. Not just because I was worried that there would be people that would come in and basically not be good, and not follow our rules of conduct that I would have to throw out, and instead of throwing them out, I would be able to make an example of them, and show that, basically that's what happens, but also just that I could have this as a sort of disciplinary tool where I really wouldn't have to do much to get people in and out. I don't know. It was, and also, of course, for fun. I ended up conceding one thing to the people in Gulag, and if you have that role, it does supersede every single other permission, so no matter what other roles you have, aside from admin, which nobody else is going to have, you can only ever, basically you can do nothing, still. The only thing you can ever do is you can post reactions. And we did figure out, after a little bit of fooling around, that you can spell things out with reactions, but that's, I don't know, whatever. Not overly concerned about that, considering how much time and effort it takes. So, yeah. It's just one little weird thing. Just one thing. I did end up making a bunch of roles. One that is yet to be used, which is coach, because we're going to be running a fantasy football league. That is the unofficial announcement right there. It's probably going to be officially announced this coming weekend. Who knows if this will be out before then? It'll probably come out. The earliest it's going to come out is on Saturday. You guys know that. So, maybe it will, maybe it won't. This weekend we're going to be babysitting Oliver again, and date night's on Friday, so I don't know. That's tomorrow. I don't know how much time I'm going to have to make the zombie train, but I will make it eventually. Yeah. So, pros and cons, right? I mean, I sort of touched on that. I've covered why. I've covered why I made the Discord. If there's any further questions, feel free to ask them below. I haven't covered... I can cover what the roles are real quick. Dispatcher is myself. These are... The first three are based off of the podcast. There's Dispatcher, Engineer/Fireman, which is everybody else on the podcast, and then Brakeman, which is the guest, which is a temporary role. The only thing that does is let you get into the other podcast groups. There's the rank of Horseman, which I try to only apply one rank to people at a time. I know that's not necessarily the most efficient way to do things, but that's, I didn't realize from the get-go, this is one of the things that I missed out on. I didn't realize from the get-go that you could give people more than one rank at a time. And I'm realizing I could have made the Horseman, or the Engineer and Fireman rank much simpler by, instead applying all the Horseman rank, which is the next rank down, where you get access to the Horseman groups. But the Engineer and Fireman already get that baked into their role. Instead, I could have just had it so they got access to, the other stuff. So that they only ever had access to the podcast stuff if you're an engineer/fireman, and you also have to have the Horseman role added, which to an extent makes a lot of sense because it's not a either or. It's an if-then. If you are an engineer/fireman, you are also a horseman, and if you are a horseman, you are not necessarily an engineer or fireman. There's really no reason to do it one way or the other necessarily, but I could have done it the other way. And as the other roles that I've added since, including coach, sort of follow the other way model, the fact that engineer and fireman doesn't is a little frustrating to me. Also, the fact that I did have to go through much greater pains with the various horseman groups in order to make them compatible in that way. So, anyway, those are the top groups, or top roles. Horseman being the next one down. And then underneath Horseman, technically, because Brakeman isn't a real role, underneath Horseman is the rank of Hobo. And hobos are... You're not quite a horseman, but you're like an honorable mention of a horseman. You are almost one, or you would be in the running to be one. There are a couple of people with this rank right now. I think it is only a couple. Eastrail is one, and the main reason that Eastrail is one is the fact that he plays Siege with us, or hasn't yet, but will as soon as we get a half-decent squad put together in some free time. He asked if, he said he got it, so I put him in the Siege group back on Skype. And that's one of the things that I miss, is having all those little independent groups. That's kind of obnoxious, if you guys could hear that. So, I was like, okay, we're going to have our competitive gaming horseman group, and that means that, because Eastrail is in one of our horseman groups, basically, on Skype, then he gets the rank of Hobo. Also, he was an excellent guest on the podcast, and so he deserves that rank for that reason as well. I digress. Back in the day, we used to, at the end of every podcast, basically vote on that, if that person should be led into the Horseman or not. Unfortunately, we don't do that anymore. We still could, but now that there's less of a reason to keep down the number of people in the Horsemen proper, because back then it was Skype had a call limit, although it actually didn't. It was just the amount of people you can ring at a time, and we didn't know that. That's something I learned much later than I guess I otherwise would have liked to. I don't know. Also, we've hit half an hour. I probably should migrate onto a different project, but I'm liking what we're doing here. We can come back to this after a half an hour somewhere else. And yeah, let's just finish this right here. So, pretty much all we're going to be doing today is texturing, but the fact that this area is almost done makes me happy. Anyway, let's go up the hill. So this is right here, and then on the other side of this tunnel is where we start. Actually, no, because this is texturing and thing. Well, yeah, we do need to do this. So let me get my seasonal forest. That's what we're using for this. And hopefully we'll be able to get all the way down, at least to the cut, in terms of scenery in a half an hour. Yeah, that's my main goal. So, yeah, those are the roles, Hobo, and then Horseman voice actor, which is self-explanatory, or Horseman VA, because actor and actress. Just wanted to shorten that up a little bit. That, fairly self-explanatory, and it just gets you access to the Horseman announcements group, which is, again, fairly self-explanatory. the downside of for Eastrail, I guess, of being a horseman is that or being a hobo is that you may get some horseman stuff spoiled for you. Graham is the other hobo, if I didn't mention. I did make some of the groups that we had public. War Thunder being the Fighting Five Chimes, that group is now public. And Minecraft the Warships Crew, that group is now public. It's just called General Minecraft. One of the things that I miss about Skype is having all the unique pictures and names for all of the different groups. The fact that you can't put in a group, or you can't put in a text channel a space, a number, or no, not a number, brackets or parentheses. There's so many things. It's so incredibly restrictive. That frustrated me thoroughly when I was trying to put things together. It's one of the things that I miss very much, is that uniqueness that we had for all the different groups, and that we won't get again, unfortunately, because of the way that Discord is, it appears. Funny names, clever names, Rocket League, the Ball Touchers. War Thunder is the Fighting Five Chimes, or was the Fighting Five Chimes. Rainbow Six is Foam Team 6. What are some of the other good ones? I mean, just the Iron Horsemen and the Warships Crew. The Iron Horsemen is the name of the server now, but that's because the name has transcended just being the Trains group. It's transcended. Railway to Hell, the Cards Against Humanity group that we didn't use very much. What was it? What's another good one that was pretty funny? I mean, Terraria's EZ. We stole that. I stole that. The two dead groups, which were kind of funny because they were groups that had major malfunctions, like I was talking about before, and that it just made sense to shut them down and migrate people somewhere else. And they just had, one was, I believe, the Fighting Five Chimes had to, the War Thunder group had to be replaced, and so it was replaced with a crashed plane. The icon was. And the other one was the Terraria group, and we just replaced the icon with a tombstone from the game. So that's funny. The Dutch Ball Run, which is totally an inside joke, but still a funny group name, that was the Wreckfest group. And that group was one of the most short-lived that existed. A group for people who live in Panama called the Panamaniacs. Panama on the Minecraft server, I mean. Trying to remember all of them. I'm missing a few of them, I think. Let's see. Think. Big think. It's big brain time. What was another little short... Oh, yeah, the Pixel Engineers. That's a funny one. The Pixel Engineers was Locomotion. The Open Horsemen for... not Open Transport Tycoon, but the other one, Open Rails. Iron Horses Trucking. That isn't funny, that's just explanatory. I don't know. There were a lot of good groups in there. Things that basically we've lost at this point. And I mean that's just totally a nostalgia thing, but I do miss having that uniqueness, that specialness in our groups. Discord doesn't have that. Discord also doesn't have baked-in video into the servers, which there is a workaround that I've been shown. I appreciate that workaround, but it's not right, I guess. It doesn't work right out of the box. You have to do something special in order to do it. So that's not good. That's a step back. There are a few things that I would say are certainly a step back from Skype. but that's one of them. Also, the fact that you can't call people, and I know how annoyed people got with the, somebody hits the button and you accidentally call everybody. I'm not sure anybody really cared, but it was certainly just sort of, oh, why is my phone ringing? But the fact that it's not like you start a call, you just go into a voice channel and this, nobody's going to notice you, really, necessarily. There's not necessarily a reason somebody's going to notice you, and saying, hey, I'm in the voice channel, anybody want to join? It's sort of like it's like, hey, how come nobody's appreciating my existence here? It's just kind of silly. At least in Skype when you use Go Live, it would send a notification, Ellis D'Amelio has gone live, or has started a call. At least you had that, but Discord doesn't do that. I don't have anyone to practice my Russian with. Okay, that's a joke, but it is what it is. There are definitely pros and cons. I wouldn't say it's absolutely better. I would say that it's absolutely more versatile than Skype. That's not a hard point to argue. Not sure about user-friendliness. Skype was just fairly simple. It was hard to be not user-friendly with that program. I mean, the fact that Skype is coveted by grandmothers and businesses alike sort of speaks to the simplicity of the program. But, you can't have everything. Versatility and simplicity generally don't go hand in hand. In fact, they tend to sit opposite one another. Again, fairly clear by the divide between Skype and Discord there. Yeah, I don't know. Data handling, I mentioned. Calling, I mentioned. Yeah, I'm not sure there are too many other things. There's very little that stand out. I mean, I have had a lot of voice connection quality issues with Discord, and I know that's not necessarily a Discord problem, but I didn't have it with Skype, really, to the extent that I'm seeing it, and that's why I sort of have to shake my head a little bit, because for years, basically, I had Discord hyped up to me. It's amazing, it's so much better than Skype, it does everything better than Skype, it's absolutely what we have to do, we need to do it, we should do it right now, and I sort of went, I'm not seeing it, and I'm not going to say I'm Nostradamus here, because I didn't see it just because I didn't get into it, not because I saw the problems with it, I foresaw them. No, it was just I'm not sure I agree with that, because I don't know. But I was really going into Discord hoping to be wowed, and I wasn't. Maybe I set the bar too high, but, this is one of very few times where I tried to set the bar high. To be like, alright, I'm excited for this, I'm looking forward to doing this, and we got in there, and the first thing was actually pretty spooky, because I signed up for Discord, or no, sorry, correction, I had not signed up yet. I had put the program on my computer. Never had a Discord account before July 4th of this year. I put the program on my computer to open it I opened it the first time, and it addressed me immediately. Welcome, Admiral Ellis. Admiral Space Ellis. There is no way it should have known that username. Moreover, that is not my username. I have no space in my name, and I have never put a space in Admiral Ellis. On top of that, there's nothing on my computer, really, that points to Admiral Ellis being a preferred username. Certainly not one with the space. On Reddit, I have one without the space, just like I do just about everywhere that I use Admiral Ellis. On YouTube, I believe I used a space in it, and that I'm going to have to figure out something to do with that channel, because I'm going to change this one over to Admiral Ellis sooner or later. Now that I'm off of Skype, it's, one more reason that I don't need to continue being Bombs321. I know nostalgia factor is high, but, just to sort of smooth out that image, round everything out. I like this persona a lot better. And I was never really... Bombs321 was never really a persona for me. It was just a username that I found funny when I was in middle school. So... Because, haha, it's counting down. Get it? Anyway. Yeah, so that's one more reason to do that. But, yeah, it was just spooky. And the only thing I can think of is something that Agility said, which is when you come on, it greets you with a random message, and it just must have picked that, but I don't know about that. That's a hell of a coincidence, and I don't like those kinds of coincidences. Even still, I cannot possibly find another explanation for it, because there's no reason it should have picked out Admiral Space Ellis. Even the computer isn't called that. The computer's called Trainman 1337. So, there's that. From the very brief period where that was the best username ever, and not silly and dumb. Not saying that it is, if that's also your username, but it's much less unique for somebody like me. There are a lot of Trainmans out there. I've brought that up before. So, really, in a way, it makes you think. So, was I really supposed to put, like, a pair of culvert pipes here? I guess I was. Sorry, I need a drink. What if I just... Yeah, I don't know about right here, because... Oh no, I mean, it does kind of deserve a culvert pipe. Let's go get that brick one. But even then, actually, and see, I'm flying right back because I'm deliberating, I'm not thinking. I don't know. This is going to be all trees. You know what, let's just finish the grass here and call it a day so that we can just pave over it later. I do think a culvert pipe would look good and be useful here, but I think the fact that we're not turning it into a giant, sluice running down the mountainside, I don't know about making a big hole in the grass for it. So, we'll put our shrubs in the back here, as we do. Yeah. And then we'll come back and we'll do that one up with stuff in a minute. Okay. So... Oh man, I just thought of a Terminus question. I should write that one down. Yeah. So we have a Discord. You can join it. You can hang out with us, talk with us, play music with us, play games with us. That sort of thing. Okay, that's a tall boy. I think I actually want like a little... Do I want a little one-span bridge here? Not too much work. Okay, so there's this. I could continue down this way. In fact, I probably should. We just have a hole in the middle that we have to patch later. In fact, I think I will continue down this way. And patch that hole in the middle later. So, I got asked this question a couple of times in the past week or so, actually, since I recorded. And it is basically along the lines of, so this is just a question I'm bringing up. It is basically along the lines of, how do you make stuff look good? And that's sort of a broad question, and it also implies that I make stuff look good, which, you're pushing it. I make stuff look okay, make stuff look passable. There are people out there that make stuff look good, and I'm not really one of those people. Now, the trick to making something look good, though, or okay, or passable, even, and this is the thing that has come back to bite me over there, off to our left and down by the swamp, is the fact that the best designs, or the best plans, the best, looks for your railroad are going to be largely based on a few assets. And that's good on multiple fronts. It helps cut down the number of assets you need for the route, therefore the number of assets you have to download for the route, therefore fewer points of failure for the assets for the route. And that part should be fairly straightforward, fairly understandable. But, load times and things like that, those will be affected too. And the biggest one is, that means when you're building the route, you only have to focus on going back between a few things, and you can access pretty much everything you need from either a small pick list or just the area around you once you get going. And I love doing that. You guys know that I hardly ever touch my pick lists, even though I have quite a few of them. I hardly ever touch them because I know that I can just grab this building from the next town over. And that is very much my preference. Because, it's less scrolling through lists and making guesswork. It's you roll into town, you go, I want that one, and you take it home with you. So, that is my first tip. Or the beginning of the advice, I should say, is to find a few assets. Or, you're ultimately going to want a few assets. So, that doesn't mean you're going to want to find 10 different textures that you like, and 20 different assets, and, or 20 different trees, and etc., etc. Most of the time, in real life, you have a very limited spectrum of stuff to choose from in a relatively small area. Species are native to areas, and yeah, there will be quite a few of them in a given area, but not a lot of them are going to be recognizable. Instead, you have a few species that are going to be recognizable, like maple, beech, and birch. Harkening back to the spline that was used all over the Iron Horseman route. And, to an extent, what we're using here. So, maple, beech, and birch. Those are some good go-tos if you're doing New England. In fact, it's a setup that is almost exclusively found in New England, and I learned today, due to climate change, is likely to sort of die out in New England / get pushed into Canada, because they won't really be able to cope with the warmer temperatures as much as some other tree species, or tree sets, more like. So, you can look on a map and see where you are, where your railroad is, or at least determine what kind of biome you're in, to get a feel for what kind of trees you're looking for. In the example that you're doing a forest. I'm going to take the example of a forest because that's something that we're using here. And I've even gone above and beyond because I'm using 3 different kinds of grass. Texture, not grass spline. I'm using 2 different kinds of, 2 or 3 or 4 kinds of different grass spline. What I'm doing is not necessarily the best example. And I will admit that right now. I'll get that out of the way. What I'm doing is not necessarily the best example. It's not going for speed. It's not going for a minimal number of assets. It is me building on the knowledge that I've gained over years and years of route building to put together a series of, assets that looks really good together and that is versatile but isn't as simplistic as what I started off with. If you want a good example of where this whole thing started in terms of this look that I've developed and these sets of assets that I've developed, look no further than the old main on the Iron Horseman Railroad. You can still download the Iron Horseman Railroad somewhere. I'm not totally certain where, but it's out there. It's on Google Drive somewhere. If you have access to our Google Drive, it's in the TIHR folder. If not, it's available somewhere in some link. Not totally certain. Either way, it's out there. If not, go back and watch some Iron Horsemen, or go back and watch me building that portion of the route, because that is in some older zombie train videos. I think that may have been before I went to the 15-minute format and the storytelling. Relatively speaking, in terms of that channel, in terms of this channel, the storytelling format is fairly recent. So yeah, it's interesting to think about how I got there. Anyway, so you want to choose a handful of assets. For the old main, what I ended up picking was 1 tree spline, 1 grass spline, and 2 textures. And that's all. It was the Maple Beech Birch tree spline, of course, and it was this sort of very, very green-looking texture, and this sort of lumpy grass and shrub spline. None of these assets I picked were particularly good in and of themselves, but they looked okay when you paired them, and that's what you're going to be looking for if you're trying to build a route. You're going to want to do things like I said, figure out where your route is, figure out what biome you exist in, therefore you know what kind of trees you want. And since we're beyond the point of using tree splines for most people, then you want to go find those exact trees in the editor, or in the queued list, or even on the download station if you don't have them. So go find some speed trees. Find the ones that you need. Those are going to be your first thing. You maybe want 1. 1 is kind of low, but 1 you can get by with. 1 or 2 or 3 kinds of tree. And maybe more if you're really feeling outrageous. Or, adventurous, I should say, not outrageous. It's perfectly rageous to have many different kinds of trees in a forest. And in fact, I probably could have even gotten by with, 5 or 6. I'm currently using 3. Like I've said, I could probably get by with at least 4. I could add 1 coniferous kind of tree, a non-deciduous tree, that would stick out in the wintertime, if the area called for it, which kind of does. So, yeah. Anyway. Figure out what kind of trees you want. That's maybe the first step, to figure out what biome you're in. And from the biome, you can derive things like trees, of course, ground cover. Are you going to have long grass? Are you going to have short grass? Are you going to have a lot of shrubberies? I know, out west, you may have large aspen groves, but you don't have a lot of undergrowth. Whereas back east, you have huge amounts of undergrowth. To the point where forests are nearly impermeable when you're looking at them from ground level, especially if you're looking at the edge of a forest. Once you're deep in, it doesn't matter as much. But something like right here, one of the biggest changes that I made was adding these shrub splines, and they make quite a bit of difference in terms of finding a medium level between the ground and the trees. Otherwise, you just have something that looks more like that, where you can see for miles and miles and miles. Over on Olive, it's like this, and that's not necessarily good. It takes away from it because it is less realistic looking. At the very least, you want some ground cover, and you want to be able to see that ground cover for a distance away from your track. But that's getting more to the building side of it. So, you're going to want to choose your trees. You're going to want to choose your ground cover. And by that I mean 1 or 2 or 3 splines. And 1 or 2 or 3 textures. If you're starting off, it's perfectly reasonable to use 1 kind of spline, or even two, one lower grass and one bushier, one kind of tree, and one kind of ground texture aside from under the track. That's the other thing you want. You want your track ballast, but that's much less dependent on biome. So, once you have all your biome things sorted, and that is it, that's just those three things, then you have the makings of a half-decent forest. You don't want to forget the grass. That's, one of the things that people tend not to think about the first time around, and it's one of those relatively small things that makes a relatively large difference. Without having this ground cover, this grass here, the world looks a lot more plain and empty and fake. Whereas with the grass, it's much easier to pass off, not necessarily as real life, but it takes you out of it a lot less in screenshots and in gameplay. So, never underestimate the power of a good grass spline. So, first step, pick your biome. Second step, find a basic set of assets. Some trees, some grass, some texture, and, well, some track and some ballast, because you'll want those too. Again, this is particularly for building a route through a forest. The other thing you're going to want is situational textures. And this is a little bit more detailed, it's a little bit more higher order, it's something that people don't necessarily get into immediately. But these, the forest floor darker, and the CUK rock cover, these are what I would call situational textures. You apply them when the ground looks a certain way. Getting the ground to look a certain way is a total other thing. If you have a flat route through a forest, or a relatively non-hilly route, where the only thing you've done is just wave a light brush that raises or lowers land over the landscape, over an otherwise flat landscape. And so you do have, some minor, very minor hills to dodge, but nothing crazy where you're going to need to cut like this. If you have that, then you don't really need situational textures at all. But if you do, then you're probably going to want one kind of dirt and one kind of rock. And the dirt you would use for embankments, as in fills, and the rock you would use for cuts. So, rock where you've removed land, therefore you've exposed the rock, and dirt where you've added land, therefore you've covered the grass and the basic terrain that you had. So, you need those two things as well. But, like I said, if you get a bog standard empty flat route where you aren't going to need that much in the way of situational texturing, then you can absolutely get by with just a couple of trees, which fit your biome, a couple of grass splines, which fit your biome, and a couple of textures, which fit your biome, or even just one of each. Once you have found a combination that looks good, that you actually like to look at, and looks good in screenshots, and stuff like that, don't just pick the first ones you find, definitely browse around. What you're going to want to do, and you might want to do this for several combinations so you know what you really like best, is make a medium-sized square of them. Not a whole tile by any stretch, a small portion of a tile that you have as almost like a diorama. And this is not talking about anything with tracks in it. You probably want to have your tracks laid by this point. And don't put the ballast underneath them yet. And you want to make a small square of forest. And I do mean square because then it'll be interchangeable no matter which way you grab it. Then you're going to want to grab that with your copy-paste tool and just go to town with it. And that means your forest will be fairly consistent. And it means that you will take those relatively few textures and assets that you learned, or that you used, and spread them around your route. And it's really as simple as that. Then, once you have the trees and stuff pasted on top of the track, be sure not to paste, depends. If you want to use the add mode, you can paste splines right on top, and you can have the ballast down already. I don't use that personal preference. I put the splines down first. Mostly because I don't want to use the add mode, because then you will just have an increasing density of trees if you have to copy over the same spot more than once. Anyway, we've spent a half hour on texturing these two small sections, so let's go back to what we were doing. It is marginally important for me to finish this today, because I don't want to have to come back to it. So, I would like to finish this area. And I would also like to see the grass that I'm putting down, but I guess that's not that important. You know, holding myself to 30 minutes for a specific thing will probably keep me from lollygagging too much. It'll keep me from sitting there and scratching my head on too many things, and it'll help me sort of move along with the things that I need to do. It is important for me to get this done. You know, get it done by the end of the year. That's my ultimate goal. I think it's doable, although I'm not certain. You know, with everything else that's come around these days for me, it never ends. Also, we are in the second half of the show, and I've got a couple of comments, so I should go take those comments. And I don't think there was anything that I started and didn't finish, but of course, if there's anything that I started a tangent on and never came back to, feel free to remind me specifically what that tangent is, or ask a question about it, and I will definitely come back to it next episode. Remember, you guys have the power when it comes to what I talk about. It's all you. Which is why I take comments like this. First comment. Oh, right, I was talking to Brady Cure about his railroads. Augustus is the middle point where the farmer delivered the goods, and Deer Creek has the mill because it's closer to the other town that needs the goods. It's interesting to me that you say that. Is there going to be an interchange in Deer Creek to a railroad that would take it that further distance, or would it be taken by truck from there? Having an interchange on a model railroad gives you lots of excuses to do all sorts of fun things. Yeah, having a mill there, I mean, good point, it's closer, but why not just put the mill where you need the goods? Unless whatever you have doesn't do well traveling over long distances, but you said it was just, you know, grain and stuff, which can travel pretty darn far. So, I don't know. Again, there are lots of reasons for mills to be where they are. And I hope you don't take offense and feel like you have to go on the defense because I'm questioning your motives in building this route. I'm just trying to make sure that everything's bulletproof. And maybe you don't care. If you don't care, you don't care. But it's important to me, so I'd like to ask it of other people, so that people definitely get the gears turning, because I feel like it can be very interesting to sort of think through, why is this way? It's sort of critical thinking, except you come up with the problem, too. And it is critical thinking. But whatever the answer is. Because you can't really get it wrong, now can you? So, yeah. I appreciate you coming back and saying things about your layout. I do like your layout, or at least the concept of it. And if you joined our Discord, which I don't know what your name is on Skype/Discord, then you can feel free to post pictures of it in the Trains Route Building group, because the Trains Route Building group is not just for trains, despite being called that. It's for any route building. Or you can just put them in photo dump, because that is for photo dumping. Trains Route Building is specifically for route building, not photo dumping of route building. If you have a million pictures of your home layout that you want to post, it doesn't go in Trains Route Building. It goes in photo dump, because it's a photo dump. A photo dump is more than 5 pictures. You can get away with 5, but no more than 5. Then you spend some time in Gulag. I have a running document of Gulag, and who is in and why they are in, or who has been in and why they are in. Yeah. Let me see. I missed a spot. And so I'm gonna, maybe reuse some of the reasons, but I've tried to make them sort of funny and oddly specific. Like Ogilius got thrown in Gulag for not appreciating art. And you know what? I can do this. I can fill in this area here. There definitely should be a culvert under here. I'm not sure anybody is thinking that there shouldn't be. Anyway. I have to come back to that. That's a copy-paste area. This is too. So we're just going to push along the edge of the swamp for now. We got 20 minutes before we shift gears and we start copy-pasting. Like I said, copy-pasting is limited to the last 30 minutes of the show. The reason for that is because it tends to cause game crashes in Tane. I don't know if it does in 2019, but I will find out soon enough, hopefully by the end of the year. Although, I don't think we're going to be doing much copy-pasting if we wrap this up right by the end of the year. The next section is 15 miles of farms and fields down out to the next town of Bellington, which is where a lot of the grain comes from. A lot of the grain and other stuff in the area comes from Bellington. And also the next town up, which I don't remember what that's called. Hold on. Oops. Oop, 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 oop. Sorry, I'm slightly distracted now. Yeah. Having an interchange there makes a lot of sense for the factory to be there. Alright, it helps promote the idea that the factory would be there. Sorry, distract. I'm not good at doing things. Okay, so I don't really want to add more here because of the copy-pasting that's going to come. We did establish that the trees are going to come down all the way to here, which means that we need a lot more splines along the edge here. That's the main takeaway right now. We also need to do this area up with something that isn't just regular grass texture mess. Yeah, biome is important. Figuring out where you are, figuring out what belongs there. Spend some time in Google Maps, Google Street View, that sort of thing. That will really help you. It'll really give you a feel for what you're looking at and what you're trying to replicate if you have an area that you're trying to be prototype off of. Too many times people just try to wing it. I'm one of those people. I have totally just tried to wing it, and it's not necessarily a smart thing to do. Because you'll end up trying to put together a combo that really doesn't go together and trying to build a scene that really wouldn't exist in real life, and people have an eye for that. Even if they don't think they do. People do. They will recognize when something is out of place, when something is weird, when something doesn't look right for whatever reason. And they will use those exact words, because they won't know why it looks wrong, necessarily. They won't be able to put their finger on it, necessarily. Unless they spend a lot of time on Google Earth. Or just play a lot of GeoGuessr, I guess. But, it will feel wrong. And that's the thing that breaks the immersion, not necessarily something looking ridiculous. Because if something does look ridiculous, you can go, yeah, that looks pretty funny for a train's route. But something that just looks a little bit off and is clearly trying to be not off, that's the kind of thing that'll give it all away. That'll just blow the whole thing out of the water and make it feel like, well, this route's kind of trash. It's space trash. It's garbage. So, yeah, that's the kind of thing to worry about. That's the kind of thing to look out for. Is my combination realistic slash good looking slash realistic looking, whatever. Because ultimately, at the end of the day, we're building these trains routes, and yeah, we all have our preferences, we all have our styles, but there is a looks good versus doesn't look good. And it's not particularly objective, but it exists. And a lot of what founds the looks good versus not looks good, aside from just general quality of textures, which that's another thing to look out for. You want textures that when you spin, they don't look terrible. That sort of thing. That can cover areas without looking really tiley. Yeah. That sort of thing. You want that because that's just actual production quality of the route. But there's also the fact of, do things mesh well? Does the grass stand out, or does it blend in like it's supposed to? Or does it blend in too much? The special textures that are in 2019, I think, are fantastic for that, because it really takes a lot of the hassle about figuring out what kind of grass goes on top of what kind of ground. At the same time, you can still play around with that, which I think is, in some cases, one of the biggest things that you can do, is to just play around with how your grass looks. And when you're doing something like this, where it's a long way from anything, you don't necessarily have to go double wide with the grass, like I'm doing here. You can just have a couple of strips so it disappears into the forest. But it definitely helps your game and your route to have something right off the roads, and something right off the railways especially. Having something that looks like it belongs, and something that makes it feel like you didn't neglect an area. Because if an area feels neglected, that takes you out too. It's like, well, this is low detail. This area is, clearly they just sort of moved on from it. They didn't do much about it. They didn't do much with it. And you don't want an area of your route that people are looking at to necessarily feel like that. Middle of the woods, yeah, you can skimp. But beside a railroad, absolutely not. Beside a road, it depends on the road. Here we're doing roads that are alongside the railroad track, or near to the railroad track. And so I am going not all out, but I'm doing quite a bit to make sure that we have ample texturing and scenicking and that sort of thing. I don't want to have a moment or a place where it looks like I just decided, nah, I'm not going to do this to the standard that I've decided the rest of the route is going to go to. There are certainly areas where I've slipped, but there are also areas where I've, gone above and beyond in places where people are probably never really going to look. Ashbury Ranch sort of being one of them, but Ashbury Ranch is on the tracks at least. Adams is much farther from the tracks, and it is a fairly low detail town. There's not a whole lot going on there. There's no, there aren't a lot of fences or anything. That sort of thing. Mason's Landing and Mason Valley both being on, well, one of them being on the main line and the other one being on the branch line, the valley line. Those two deserve some TLC, which I've been giving them. The olive forestry also deserved some TLC. And I did my best. I endeavored to give it to the olive forestry as best I could. And, even things alongside bodies of water. Basically, you want your edges, because if you have an empty space where somebody can be swinging the camera around, you want that to look presentable to an extent, at least. Nobody's necessarily going to be taking a screenshot of Treadway Beach. Nobody's necessarily going to be taking a screenshot of the town of Adams. Nothing's going on up there. There are probably going to be plenty of screenshots taken of Ashbury Ranch. I've taken plenty already. Of Mason's Landing and Mason Valley, especially, like I said, being on the main line. These are places that matter. A lot more. All places are created equal. You should build your route to a standard, but some places are much more equal than others. Need another drink. places of the route will receive disproportionate amounts of attention. And yeah, to an extent, I talk a lot about routes as a product, as a, this is the kind of thing where somebody's going to come and look at this. And whether you're, there's always people, and you may be one of them, and I was one of them for a stretch, that build routes just for themselves. And that's, that's just as well. Because building routes, okay, can you turn the camera the way I want it to go? Thank you, please. Thank you. Building routes is a really zen experience aside from when you get angry like that. That was a really poignant time for that to happen. But building routes is typically a fairly zen experience. It's not stressful, really, unless something starts to break. It's not the kind of thing where you have any sort of high stakes. It's not like you're worried about something not turning out right if you're not doing it for like a competition, which, we hold those, but it's been a little while. And even then, it's, it's among friends. Nobody's getting any prize money. So, it is what it is. I don't know. I don't know what to say. I don't know what to say with that. I talk a lot about the presentability of a route. But if nobody sees it, then it doesn't matter. You can build a route that looks like whatever you want. Not to be dismissive and say I couldn't care less, but it's not my place to care. I'm never going to see it. You're never going to show it off. You're not going to care what people think of it because nobody's going to think of it. If you're happy with your route, no matter what it looks like, it's good. Brady, you may be building your home layout, and, I don't know if you've got any friends in real life that also appreciate trains, or friends that hang out at your house, often, or whatever. So, there's a non-zero chance that you're going to have that layout at your house, and it's just going to be you and your parents that see it the vast majority of the time. I don't expect this to be something big that you're making here. I don't expect to hear that you're going to be hosting the next operating session on your home layout. Of course not. That'd be ridiculous. And by the same token, if you're just building a trains route just because you want to build something in trains, then none of this applies. If you don't want it to. None of it has to apply. So, when I talk about routes, don't feel the need to necessarily conform to everything I say. I mean, don't feel that need anyway, but especially not if you're just building a route for you. If you're building a route for you and you're stressing out about, well, I need it to look like this, you really don't need to stress, man. You can set your own lofty standards. You can do that however you want. But that's not what I'm here talking about, really. Okay. We need to continue along the edge here. Anyway. Let's see, where is... Okay, over here. Oh, okay, I can see it. Yeah, this whole area should be reeds. There maybe should be like one channel down the middle of it that's actually kind of quick flowing. But even then, I don't necessarily know. I'm just trying to, put down reeds in all the places where the water would be shallow enough for them to grow, because they'll grow anywhere. There's a just like many other things on this route, there's a specific area that I think of when I've worked on the swamp in the past. And it's an area where I used to go a lot of the time with summer camp. And we would go down to this marsh and we'd go wade in the water and we'd try to find little sea creatures and stuff like that, these aquatic life forms that live in the brackish water in the tidal areas. Or just play around in the water and the mud. It was summer camp. I was a kid. And it's sort of a weird thing when you go down to one of those places because it looks disgusting. I'm not going to lie, it does. You know, you look at it and go, oh, look at that brown water. But then you get in it and it's, you know, it's these relatively free-flowing tidal forces. Tide comes in, tide goes out. You can't explain that. But what you can't explain is the fact that, or what you also can't explain, rather, is the fact that once you get in that water, it's suddenly many, many times less disgusting. It's the kind of thing where I would go, I don't want to get in that. And then you'd put your water shoes on because you don't want to step on like an angry crab. You'd put your water shoes on and you'd get out there and you'd just start walking around. And you'd be like, well, this is really cool, actually, to be able to just walk through here. You'd think it'd be, like, damn near inhospitable with the way that it looks, but it's not. It's just some marshy area. And this is, in particular, the area that I'm talking about is down near Galilee, Rhode Island, down near, yeah, Galilee is the name for the area. It also has an amazingly named road called the Galilee Escape Road, which I guess they built so that they had a way out that was a little bit higher above the water in the event of a hurricane coming in and whatever. So, yeah. I don't know. It's a cool road name, I'll just say that much. I would love to model something like it in the future. Okay, can you... But yeah, speaking of modeling, Brady does say, yes, plus it is really hard to get my parents to help me pay for it anyway, so price is important. Yeah. Price is important, and I assume space is important as well. You don't have your whole house to take over with a model railroad. I know my parents never would have, or certainly weren't happy when I laid track all over the house, which I did, like, well into my high school years. But especially when Christmas was coming, it was like, well, you know, can you really say no to that? And it turns out, yeah, you can. You can't say no to that. But now I have my own house, so nobody will stop me from laying train track all over the house. Oh, somebody will. Her name's Madison. Maybe next time I have her on, I'll talk to her about that. I'll say, you know, everyone else is doing it. You should let me lay train track all over the house on Christmas. We're hosting a Christmas party. We're going to have a whole bunch of drunken Tomelios here. You should absolutely let me lay train track all over the house. They can trip on it. And step on things. Yeah, on second thought, maybe that's not such a good idea. The thing is, with this house, part of the agreement with buying it was that I have to host Christmas, Tomelio Family Christmas. That's in a short 5 months from today, when I'm recording this. It's interesting that I looked down and noticed that it was the 25th. And, boy, are we unprepared. Never done anything like that before. Certainly going to need some help. Unfortunately, nobody watching this probably is going to help me. Speaking of people watching things, my mom will occasionally watch the Terminus podcast. I don't know why, but she does, and then she'll occasionally leave a comment like, wow, you're, you know, doing whatever. You're still doing this. I'm like, yeah, I'm still doing that. It's, you know, it's a thing that we do. Nobody else watches it, so that's my main confusion. Why is she watching it? Nobody else does. Actually, I do kind of want to channel through here. Or, no, it can stop right there. We can say the flow slows down through here when it widens out. I need to put this up so I have an eye on our time. We are about to hit an hour 30, so I can get on to doing some more other stuff. Some more copy pasta. Which I think what I'm mainly going to do is work on those two culverts down the line there. Because that's... I mean, I wouldn't say it's pressing, but it is another hole. Meanwhile, the canyon looms at me like, hey, you need to do this. I just don't know how to make a canyon. I really should go look up, and I think I said this last episode, I should go look up the canyon that actually, that this bridge is actually in, for inspiration, because it is a forested area. And I think, you know, some of this will still end up being forested when we're done with it. Anyway, let me grab this. So I need tools, I need to turn off terrain. I don't want terrain, I want to turn off track, I don't want to paste track. I want to grab a half-decent section of forest. That looks good. That's not actually that big. And let's go over to where the culverts are. So the first one's going to be right here. I don't want to paste over anything that we've already done. So I need to wait till that loads in a little bit so that I can see where the edge of the texturing is. It's right there. Okay, that works. And then one more time, right there. The other thing is, I would continue it all the way down to here, but we need to finish doing the other stuff along the edge, although I will get a little bit closer to it with the texturing that we can do, or the stuff that we can do. Getting it down the canyon is one thing. Let me actually grab a larger section than this. Squares are good because you can spin squares and it won't really matter. But at the same time, you don't necessarily want to be spinning when you are copy-pasting, because then you have just that much less control over what you're doing. Yeah, see how it replaces the trees on its edge when we do that? If it didn't, we would have a slowly growing denser forest, or a rapidly growing denser forest in a couple of cases, and that isn't good. I don't really want to proceed out onto the peninsula until I get grass where it needs to go, because that's going to be the markers of where we need to put the edges of the trees, and putting down grass while the trees are already down is a pain in the neck. So this area also needs a little bit of work, but I am going to put down that right there. There's the heaving lake. Grab a smaller area. I want to get that a little closer to the edge there. Yeah. Okay. So I think we're done here. I'll see you guys later. No, I'm kidding. We're 2 minutes into the half hour, we've run out of things to copy-paste. But we really haven't. We can continue copy-pasting all the way down the line. However, we've got to go back to culverts. Let me just spin this and finish filling in this area right here. There. And there. If you move your mouse right after you click, the copy paste will be a little bit less than ideal. So, it won't go exactly where you want it, but it's hard to not move your mouse after you click, especially if the camera is still moving. And by move your mouse, specifically I mean move your selection. You can not move your mouse and the camera will still be moving, and that's enough to do you in. Oh, you know what? I just realized why this is happening. Because there's a little bit in that section that is missing. And did I make any other random holes while I was at it? No, okay. We've got this whole section filled in. This is going to be like another Ashbury Ranch. For a while, we had this area that hadn't been filled in, and there was stuff done all around it, which it's amazing the progress we've made since then. But it's also amazing the progress that we have yet to make, all the way up the river, all the way up Little Creek, and the Daffodil Stream, and also I think we still have terrain work to do right here. Yeah, we do, because I did this and then lost it because of a game crash. So, how about we definitely don't do that right now, because I don't want to lose it a second time. So there's invisible track here, and the AI like to use it, so I need to make sure that they can't use it. I might put like an invisible train there. That might do it. but I also want to be able to use it if I so choose. So, having an invisible train there, probably not smart, because I'll just crash into it. Okay, so we need to go grab those culvert pipes. Those are just those brick arches that we used on the other side of Adams. It really is, the area around the track, and specifically just the grass, is a sort of linchpin in terms of getting that other stuff done. Culvert pipe should be like right over here or something, right? Come on. There should be culvert pipes here. If not, I forgot them here and they're somewhere else. There they are. Like I said, I refuse to look things up. Also, wait a minute. This area needs to be copy-pasted. Hold on, just a moment. And I am going to do the thing that I normally don't do, because it will make this a little bit easier. I'm going to turn on that. I also want a much smaller area of selection. And I just want to cover that, because it'll put trees down. Oh. I thought it wouldn't cover that. Never mind that. Undo that. Oops. Just replace. Replace anyway. I thought it was going to do what I want. Alright, and we need the edge of that, which is going to be like right there. That's where the culvert is. We need to paste again because we missed a spot. Oh, the joys. The joys, the joys. And need to fill in this with this texture. Spin me. Okay. And with this, the Oz forest floor darker on the edge that we replaced with grass. Anyway, for the last 20 minutes of the show, I was kind of saving this. For the last 20 minutes of the show, I will talk about Volvo. Because Dean asks, why do you love Volvo so much? The reason I love Volvo so much is because I was indoctrinated into it. But also because Volvos are great. So it started off with, my mom had a Volvo. As many things do. Rarely, just like with sports teams, etc., rarely do you get to form your own opinion about these sort of things. It sort of comes to you. Or it sort of is given to you. It's whatever car you start with, you fall in love with. And with my parents, or specifically my mom, having this car for basically my entire span of memory. She bought it when I was 2 years old and then had it until I was 16 or 17, at which point she gave it to me. You know, that's a long time for a person to have a single car. I got the impression that, hey, these cars tend to stick around for a while. And also, I love this car because I remember it for my entire life. And this is I am talking about that specific Volvo, the Volvo 940, the 1994, also known as Nelly, which is sitting in my driveway right now. After a 4-year hiatus, living in a garage after a mistake by yours truly. Sitting in my garage, actually. Got this new Volvo wagon here. But, I mean, part of it is just that. It's been passed down to me. Like, loving the Patriots. It's, you know, I love Volvos because they're what I know. And I know that, just to add to that fact, I've got a mechanic that I can really trust, who knows Volvos inside and out. I've got a I've got, you know, a lot of people who know these cars. You know, my mom who knows that car in particular, of course. I know that these older Volvos with the derivatives of the old red block engines, they can run for hundreds of thousands of miles without needing major engine work. In some cases, 1 million miles have been documented on a Volvo red block engine without needing major maintenance, without needing a rebuild. And it's stupendous. It's not something you tend to get with a lot of other cars, and that's part of the reason I love them, because they are so robust, because they are safe, because they are tanky. Volvos, I'm not sure how true this is to modern day, but Volvos for a long time used continuous seam welds instead of spot welds to put their frames together, which meant they were, a lot more robust, and they would last a lot longer, and they would hold up more in accidents. Volvo released their 3-point seatbelt patent so that anybody could use it. Volvo in general is a very wholesome company, and they're a very safety-oriented company. On top of the fact that they went crazy with their ad campaign for the 200 series, the 700 series, and, going into the 900 series with boxy but good, I adore it. And I adore the style, too. I love these squarer cars. I don't like the rounded edges on a lot of cars these days. Some things definitely do look slick, or look sleek, or look nice. But when it comes to the car I want to be seen in, I want to be seen, it's hip to be square, I should say. So I like the style. Why do I like the style? Don't really know. Just grew up with it, I guess. I like the dependability, the reliability. Certainly I'm not the best example for that, because, my wagon has more miles on it vertically than horizontally at this point, and I just ordered another part for it off eBay. It's not something major, but, it's the AC condenser, which apparently the old one, according to my mechanic, it had a big hole in it. So I had to go and find a replacement for that. He called his regular suppliers, and I couldn't find anything on normal suppliers, so I had to go on eBay and get a hold of one. It really does go to show how on one hand difficult, on the other hand easy it is to get parts for these cars, these older cars. They have a cult around them. They have a following to this day, the 200 series in particular. But yeah. I don't know, I love that. I love the culture. I love the reliability. I love I've been totally suckered in by the ad campaign. Like, these are the kind of things that, I love in a car. At the same, and the fact that it's what I've known for my entire life, and that's, a huge factor, and that this car was given to me, and I was like, well, okay, let me look into this, and I just found this amazing Volvo community, who just likes to do, all sorts of great or sometimes silly things with Volvos, and like I said, finding my mechanic Tony, and him being as just absolutely fantastic as he is of a human being and as a mechanic, it makes me happy to own one of these cars. And to know that, I may be coming... Oh, wow, I missed it by that much. I may be coming up on... Well, I crossed 200,000 miles in one, and I crossed 150,000 miles in the other one, not all too long ago. Well, it was 4 years ago in the other one. Because it's at 160-some thousand right now. But knowing that doesn't mean it's the end of the road, or even close. That's a big deal to me. So, it's that too. It's the style, the literal style. It's the company's style in their advertising and in their, just their way of going about things. It's the fact that, frankly, I love Sweden as a country, as they just consistently put out amazing things into this world. Although, Lego is not Sweden, but it's Nordic. But that's one thing to count. The Ultimate Digital Legos, that'd be Minecraft, is Swedish. The band Wintergatan and their Marble Machine, Swedish. Volvo, of course. IKEA, absolutely. Love IKEA. Yeah. So yeah, those are just some of the reasons. And that only took 5 minutes, and I expected it to take 20. Maybe I should come up with more reasons. But I do. I love it for the culture. I love it for, almost the memes that the company itself has perpetuated, or perpetuated rather. The fact that I know I have a couple of really great cars that are going to last me a long time, even in New England, cars that were built to be all-weather cars, even in the snow, even though they're rear-wheel drive. They, well, at least the 240 handles really well for a rear-wheel drive car in the snow. Yeah. I don't know, it's just, it works out like that. I need a drink. And the fact that I got my hands on a 7-seater wagon just makes me happy. Alright, so those are those two culverts that did not really take us that long. We came all the way to over here, but I didn't put the grass in like a moron. I was just talking about it, and then I went and did it anyway. Idiot. Give me the grass. Where is it? Oh my god, it's all the way over here. Well, I'll have to get to that area later then. Because I don't want to necessarily be trying to go at this from every angle at once. So let's just put grass around here just so we can start working on this a little bit more next time. I'd love to be able to finish up this area and then move on to the canyon itself. Although, like I said, I feel like more research is really required before I make a half-decent attempt at that, because I'm not good at canyons. I just don't have a lot of experience with them. What do you know? Rhode Island doesn't have too many. In fact, the canyons that we have are underwater. Cool thing about that, right? So, a fjord is formed, most typically, when a river erodes a valley, and then sea level rises to fill that valley, or lake level, or whatever's at the end of the river, rises and then fills that valley. So you have steep eroded sides and a wide, flat water bottom. And underneath that, the valley would continue down, of course, to where the riverbed once was. There are a handful of fjords in the United States. I know that Nordic areas, particularly Finland and Norway, are known for their fjords. But there is only one fjord in the United States on the east coast. That is the Hudson River Valley, just north of New York City. Is technically a fjord, because it's relatively tidal. The river is wide and deep, and easily navigable by ship. And it was formerly, weathered down by the Hudson River, or whatever the proto-Hudson River was, running in a valley into an ocean that was slightly lower. Because, during the Ice Age, there was a lot less water in the ocean, so the ocean level was lower. Other funny thing, though, I learned in geology is that the continent, North American continent in particular, I'm talking about, was pressed down by the weight of the ice of glaciers, pressed into the mantle, sort of like an overloaded ship. Which I didn't realize that was possible, but because the mantle is basically a liquid, it really does make sense. But you pile that much ice up on top of the crust, and that tectonic plate starts to sink a little bit. So the sea level rise that we measure in, someplace like, I don't know, the Jersey Shore, if you're measuring sea level rise there year over year, you actually have to add an amount to it because of how much that the continent is rebounding from being pressed down. It's bizarre. It's something I had never thought of. But if you go to some place where there was never that much ice, say Central America, your measures of sea level rise there will be unadjustable, or unneeding of adjustment. But if you're doing it at a place where there was all that ice, then you will need to adjust it by how much the crust is rebounding in a year, because it's still rebounding, because things do move that slowly on a geological timescale. The crust is still rebounding from the pressure that it felt 10,000 years ago. How weird / cool / bizarre is that? And I mean, it really hurts to think about sometimes, because you realize on a geological timescale, you and me, us poor humans, we will see nothing. We will see virtually nothing happen. I mean, we are at a time and point in history of virtually unprecedented change, aside from when major cataclysmic events happened. But even still, I mean, we may see this great forest migration in the next 50 years, where the maple, beech, and birch trends northward, as do a number of other types of trees, which would change the landscape in New England, among other places, particularly in the fall. I don't know, it would make a significant difference. But that, in and of itself, is just so rare. The fact that we are we are able to witness any significant amount of change. We're in an unusual time in history, and I started out by talking about the way that we're in the information age, and we are also in this kind of, this age where the world truly is changing around us in a way that we haven't seen before, in the way that humans really haven't seen before. Certainly not over the course of a single lifetime. Again, without some major cataclysmic event. Of course, the only cataclysmic event that comes to mind is the meteorite that wiped out the dinosaurs. And that's really not something that humans were around for. Certainly not any ones that I've ever heard of. Maybe, what was that movie? Wasn't there a movie, Butterfly Effect, where they go back in time and they, kill a dinosaur right before the meteorite hits? That's the pastime. That's what they go and get to do. It's just, they have a time machine and it's really only useful for that. Or it's only used for that. I don't know. That right now, sorry, that just fried my brain, because I'm thinking about this concept, right? You're in a world where you have commercially viable time travel, not just time travel that lives in somebody's secret lair, or in, somebody's, laboratory that they've spent, decades working on and perfecting, and it costs some unholy amount of power to run, and it's a one-way trip, and, blah, 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 blah. No, they have actual, honest-to-God time travel that is commercially viable, and that's the first time something goes wrong, when someone steps on a butterfly on one of these tourism missions? Really? I don't remember the concept behind time travel as in what makes it possible in that movie. But that seems far-fetched to me. Just the basic concept. I'm sure they explained it somehow, or at least I hope they do. But this is the kind of thing I'm talking about. If you're writing for fun, you can get away with that kind of stuff. If you're writing to put it before an audience, maybe think that stuff through. Don't get me wrong, it was kind of a cool movie. I mean, I don't remember that much about it, but I don't remember it being bad. It had a sort of relatively unique take on the way that time travel changes in the past would affect the future. Like, there would be a delay as it propagates through time. Relatively novel concept. I mean, Back to the Future sort of did it. But Back to the Future had a fading out. This came in literal waves. Like, it would just wash over the landscape. Boom, something would be different. So, yeah, it's interesting. It's interesting what they did there. I think it was called Butterfly Effect, and it involved literally stepping on a butterfly. Which would make sense. I don't remember much about it. It might have been a bad-for-TV movie. I mean, a made-for-TV movie that was just put on Sci-Fi, which then that would kind of make sense why it didn't make a whole lot of sense, but was relatively entertaining otherwise, because Sci-Fi, if we recall, they have brought us a grand total of, I think, 6 Sharknado movies for some reason. But I'm not necessarily complaining. I also haven't seen them. I kind of want to watch them just for the sake of absurdity. That's the reason that I want to watch them. I think that's the reason that everybody watches them, though. I don't know a single person that's like, yeah, I love Sharknado. It's such a deep and inspiring and interesting film. It's like, that's not what it's for. It's there to be dumb. It's, you know, nobody is like, Airplane taught me how to fly. Or like, Kung Pao is a deep and emotional movie for me. Or like, Galaxy Quest is the epitome of science fiction, although Galaxy Quest is pretty damn good. Maybe Spaceballs then. I'm not trying to diss Spaceballs for a second. Spaceballs is a fantastic film, but it is 100% a parody and nothing else. It's a really, really good parody. But Spaceballs is just a parody. Whereas Galaxy Quest, if you haven't seen Galaxy Quest, it is a Star Trek parody. But it's more than just a Star Trek parody. It's a Star Trek parody. It's Star Trek in a world where the TV show is real, but also there are aliens and stuff. Also where the aliens are able to intercept our radio signals, our TV signals, many light years away, show up with the ship from the show, assuming that the humans just know what to do. Because in the show they knew what to do. That's the basic premise of the movie. I don't really want to spoil anything else if somebody hasn't seen Galaxy Quest. I don't know. It's not a new film by any stretch of the imagination. It'd be like me spoiling the end of My Cousin Vinny. But, go see both of those films. If you haven't, I'm sure they're probably... Maybe they're both on Netflix? I don't know. If you have Netflix... if not, I don't know, you can probably... They're not exactly difficult to get your hands on films. Go to your local library and take them out. That's what I do to watch My Cousin Vinny, typically. Or, well, now I have it on DVD, but that's what I did before. Or Grand Budapest Hotel. That's what I did for that. Yeah, libraries are good for you. I need to, make sure that I make use of my libraries here. The other thing with libraries is you're already paying taxes for them. Make use of them. They're great resources. You can use, if you don't have the internet or whatever, you can use the internet and a computer there. But you can also use, a photocopier. You can use, the giant wealth of books that they have there. That's kind of what they're known for. But CDs, DVDs, HDVD, DVDs, that sort of stuff, you can get it and just keep it for a week or 2 or 3 and then return it for free. It's, why do I have to advocate for libraries? I don't know. I feel like nobody goes anymore. Maybe it's just me. Maybe I'm the one not going to the library. I'm the bad person. I did go to the library up the road a little while ago. Fax something. Because who on earth owns a fax machine? I learned the other day that the fax machine was invented before the telephone. And that seemed just completely weird and bizarre and nonsensical. And then I looked it up. Apparently it's true. Which, like I said, makes no sense to me at all. But I guess sending an image over wires is easier than sending voice. I don't know. Never really thought of that. I'm just going to stick with my dits and my das. All this fancy technology is too much for me. We're in the information age, well, I just want to go off the grid. Anyway, I'm going to finish this right here. Get some Little Caesars, because now I'm thinking about it. And I'm actually not going to do that, because I'm having pizza tomorrow. And yeah, so let's finish that right there. And I hope you guys enjoyed this video. And I will see you next week. This is the Admiral, signing off.